This today, we're starting a series called I Choose, and we're going to walk through a number of what I call simple kind of adjustments in our lives that actually lead to bigger changes. And here's a kind of paradox of our society. How many people will go to Timmy's or Starbucks or whatever? Have you ever gone and you want something to eat, but you have a hard time picking something? You ever do that? You're looking at the board and they got new specials all the time and they've got this and that and everything. Do you have a hard time with that? How many people ever, it really takes you a long time to make a decision because there's 5 things you want? Do you ever have that? Yeah? You ever date a guy that's nice enough he bought you all 5? No, that doesn't happen here? Okay, Peterborough guys, we just don't measure up, eh? There's actually a man named Barry Schwartz wrote a book called The Psychology of Choice in 2006. And this was basically the dilemma that he said that many of us suffer with is we have so much choice, it actually lends to more stress. A lot of people think if I have more choices, then I'm going to be happier. But actually having too many choices actually leads to more misery than actually fulfillment. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Barry Schwartz says the focus in our world right now is it tends to be more individualistic. And so what before used to be my purpose or my meaning I derive from a community has actually switched now to where I try to find fulfillment for myself. And so the question is, what's going to make me happy, fulfilled, feel better about myself? And so what ends up happening because of that, we tend to not have the relational contacts where we get approval from people and society or from something else, from God or different things. Instead, we look at approval as something that we earn for ourselves. Now, Barry Schwartz breaks people who choose down into 2 major categories. The first group are what he calls maximizers. Maximizers are people, when presented with a lot of choices, experience high stress because they want the best choice, right? They want the absolute best choice. I had a friend of mine, when he first met his wife, they went to a mall, and she wanted kind of a burgundy, kind of brown purse. And so they walked into the first store, and there was a burgundy brown purse. And it was the size she wanted. She really liked the style and everything like that. And he thought, this is going to be a quick shopping trip. This is absolutely amazing. This is great. We've just nailed it, right? First start. Now we can go do something meaningful. And but his wife looked at it and said, that's great. Okay, let's look some other places. He said, why? She said, because there might be a better purse. And he's like, but that is exactly what you wanted. She said, well, there might be something better. He said they spent 6 hours going around the mall, checking out the purses in every single store. Guess which purse they bought? The first one. Yes, exactly. That's what maximizers do. Maximizers experience enormous stress because we spend so much time stressing that we are constantly under stress unless we have the best. And this actually in a consumer society works as kind of a deal in that most of us go, I have this house, I really like this house, it's a wonderful house, but I'm kind of bored with this house. Maybe I can have a better house. And so I buy a bigger house. Or I really like this car, I like the horsepower, all those kind of things and all that. But hey, there's a new model out and it has a little better horsepower and I like the color better and all that. So I upgrade to that. And a lot of people end up in debt or just end up constantly feeling inferior because they don't have the best choice. And people do this with everything. They do it with relationships, Wow, my marriage is kind of rough. Maybe it's time to upgrade, right? Maybe there's someone else who makes me feel good about myself. And we lead to these choices. The other people are what he called, and this is a funny term, satisficers. Satisficers, okay, are people who take the stress off them of choice and go, all right, if I find something that is going to fit the bill for what I want, I'm not going to stress about not getting the best. I'm going to take what's available to me because time and relationship or community and purpose are important enough to me that I relegate most of the choices to the small stuff. Satisficers are people that prioritize their purposes and their choices so that they're not wasting undue emotional pressure on things that have no lasting value. You understand? See, he said the people who, and it actually, Barry Schwartz, he actually encourages companies. He said, instead of having 500 products, have 10 that are really nice. And people will probably experience a lot less stress buying into your product, okay? Now, choice is wonderful in some ways. If you're in Home Depot and you have a certain type of tap, right? And you don't have to order the part, you go in there and that specific tap, they have the exact part, right? That's kind of an awesome thing and stuff. But people who are satisficers don't waste the emotional energy on most choices because they view them in purpose, the idea of purpose over light. And so today we're going to talk about purpose. And basically this is our opening statement. This is what we want you to memorize for today. Living for the approval of people keeps us from the purposes of God. Living for the approval of people keeps you from the purposes of God. And many people, when it comes to choice, are not just worried about their individuals, they're worried about what other people think of them. Now, social pressure has some very valuable, precious ways of inputting and improving our lives, right? Like, you know, if you are dating a girl and you go over and it's the end of the meal and you burp really loud, the fact that everybody scowls at you and looks, you know, and the girl doesn't call you back and all those kind of things is a good social cue that maybe that's not a good idea to do that when you go over to other people's house, right? Social cues can be very meaningful to us. There actually is, and there's many, many books in psychology written about this, about the subtle peer pressure that we have on each other that's actually a good thing. It teaches us about how to interact with people. It teaches us how to socialize, how to learn to listen and be considerate and all those. In a Christian context, community is the most meaningful thing. Here's the catch, is socializing and choice need to be subservient to a higher purpose in our lives. Daniel Pink, who's a psychologist in business and that, wrote a book a number of years ago, and it was basically about comparing the model of work that most people have, comparing it with an ideal. Daniel Pink basically came up with this. He said, a majority of jobs people have in society are kind of McJobs. Basically, you define a McJob as a job that if you leave that job and they bring somebody else in, they can learn how to do that job completely in 2 weeks or less. Okay? And most factories or companies or, businesses are made up of 80 to 90% McJobs. There's only one problem. McJobs are not meaningful. If you do a McJob and you do it for 30, 40 years, you will learn to loathe that job because it becomes so easy that you don't have to think about it, and there's something lacking in that. Daniel Pink instead came up with an alternative. He said our work or our profession should have 3 traits to it. The first one is autonomy. Autonomy is where people trust you enough to make maybe minor, but some decisions as far as the input of your work. You have a chance to take that work and feel like you're doing something where you're not micromanaged or you're not nagged all day or you're not worried about the approval of your boss all the time and all those kind of things. You have a certain sense of autonomy where you can work, where people aren't in your space all the time. The second thing he called for was mastery. The idea is that you become good enough at that job that you're somebody who stands out. So the idea is that your job requires enough technical, enough experience and that as you go on, you learn more and more about that job. One of the reasons, for my job, for pastoral ministry and stuff, I love it so much, is it's always challenging. It's incredibly challenging. In fact, keeping up is challenging. There are many new books coming out. There's new ways of thinking, new approach to church. There's new needs people have. There's new challenges, all that. And I love that because it takes an enormous amount of effort to keep up with those things. And I actually love that. And in our work, most of us love that kind of challenge. I was talking to Mitch, a little while ago, and she's getting into film. Sorry, I'm using it for an illustration, pal. And she's actually a producer and you're doing some directing and things like that too, and with movies. And they're all these like little indie individual movies. And Craig was showing one this week. It was phenomenal. But anyways, you just talk to her about it, and she lights up. But this is not a job you can master in 2 weeks, right? It's something you always got to grow and you always got to do that. So mastery is very important. The third thing, and this is what I focus on today, the sense of purpose. Any job we do or anything we endeavor in We actually require as human beings an idea that you're part of something bigger. You're part of something meaningful. You have an opportunity to change the world. And if you look at most churches that are dying, those little churches that got like 20 people left and they're dying and they're kind of slowing down in that, I can guarantee you they've lost their sense of purpose. They may have great community, they have wonderful potlucks, they may have the salmon sandwiches on Sunday morning, which nobody likes. They may have all that stuff together, may put together a really good potluck, but they have no clue why they're meeting anymore. Because they've lost their higher purpose. People need purposes. And so I want to talk about a man that most of you are familiar with his name, but talk about something that a couple thousand years later someone wrote about him that lends itself to this higher purpose, probably 1,400 years later. And this man named Moses. Moses, we're familiar with, there's all kind of movies out and things like this. But a writer years later, a Hebrew writer writing about Moses, wrote this: "By faith Moses, when he grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than having the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward." If you're familiar with the account of Moses and that he grew up as a movie said, a prince of Egypt. He was quite literally saved from the Nile. His parents had pushed him out there in a basket because there was an order that went out from Pharaoh that all the Hebrew children were to be killed. All the babies under, I think, age 2 were to be killed. And so his parents, in order to save him, they hid him for a while. But after a while, babies' lungs get a little louder. And when they cry, it's kind of hard to hide them, right? And so his mother and his big sister, they took this basket and they released it on the Nile. It's actually fairly risky. And what should happen but Pharaoh's daughter finds him, and so Moses is saved. I mean, talk about the irony of this. She pulls the baby out, and then Moses' big sister, is about 6 at the time, runs up and said, "Would you like me to find a wet nurse for the baby?" It's pretty easy to put one and one together and get 2 and go, okay, it's probably the mother. But anyways, Pharaoh's daughter says, sure, of course. And so she goes to get her mother. And so Moses is actually raised by his mother for those first formative years until he is weaned. And then he grows up in Pharaoh's palace. The thing is that Moses isn't aware he's a Hebrew until a little later. And then he finds out he is Hebrew. And so he makes this choice. And this is a really interesting choice. The Hebrews were slaves. You take Mick Jobs and times it by 1,000 downgraded, and you have what the Hebrew people did. They made mud, they trudged through the mud, and mixed straw in, and made bricks. That's all they did their whole lives. They did it 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for their whole lives. They were slaves. That was their only purpose. And here's Moses, who lives in the palace, who has all the opportunities to do that. And what does he do? He makes a conscious choice to join his people in slavery. Interesting choice. Why would he make a choice like that? Because Moses understood a higher purpose. Something in him could not live with living in the splendor and the richness of Egypt while people who were his blood kin were suffering. And so the purpose for him, the higher purpose, and the writer in Hebrews said, looking forward by faith, Moses made a choice that he would rather be a slave and have a purpose than be a prince and live in luxury. Interesting, eh? And in a way, this is the way God challenges us to live. Culture will always put pressure on you to adapt to whatever the norms are that culture will think. And people are quite outspoken in that. How you should dress, how you look, how you do your hair, what kind of car you drive. All these kind of things are pressure, and actually your political views and your values and all these kind of things. There's an enormous amount of pressure in our society to believe a certain way. And here's the question, and this is the question for Christ followers every single day. Is it more important that I fit in with people, or is it more important that I live with my eyes focused on God? Because here's the thing, the two are not mutually exclusive. How you decide to interact with your God will affect how people think of you. Now, here's the good news. If you live as a people person, do you think you're going to please people your whole life? You ever had a bully in your office or at your school, and you thought, I know what I'll do. I'll be super nice to them and just give in. Now, I have a question. When you did that improve their behavior? You can speak. It's okay. Did that improve their behavior? Why? Mike, who's Mike? Ryan. Yeah, okay, go for it. What do you think, Jerry?
Say whenever I got bullied, you always felt like you're being sized up to their situation or their problems. Like I had one guy in one of my shop classes, and he'd always sort of taunt me in such a way that I didn't know how to react.
Yes.
So I kind of mouthed off at him one time. I said, well, what makes you think you're so smarter than I am, or something, type of attitude.
Yeah.
But I knew from that experience that he was somebody that just wanted to show off mostly.
Yeah, wanted to show off. Yeah. Made him feel better about his situation. Yeah. Someone else, why does it not stop a bully when you acquiesce to them, when you give in? Anybody else? Michael? I know you got a brilliant thought running around that noggin of yours, so. When nobody else talks, I always have Michael.
They're not doing it so that you'll actually acquiesce to them in the first place. They're doing it to impose their will on you. They just won either way. Whether you run away or you give in or you give them your lunch money or you bow and kiss their feet, they win.
You seem to have a fairly accurate perspective of a bully.
Sure.
That's right. There's something in human nature that when something comes too easy, we despise it. You ever notice that? There's something in human nature that when something comes too easy to us, we despise it. But here's the thing. You may have every emotion in you saying, oh, I got to adapt. I want people to like me. I want to be accepted and loved and all those kind of things. And our human nature goes, well, I'll give in. I'll give them what they want. And then people will love me and respect me and do that. That actually contradicts human behavior. There was a kid named Todd, grade 4. Todd was a bully in our school. It was really funny because he wasn't a big guy, but he just had the attitude. And he wasn't scared to mix it up with people. And remember, this guy was a bully. I was the one guy he didn't bully because I was twice his height. Okay? But Todd just had an enormous amount of attitude. And I remember just watching him pick on people and do all those kind of things. And one day, Todd, we were going to play together after school or whatever. And so he invited me over to his house just to pick up something. He was getting his baseball mitt or something. And we went in there, and I stood in the front lobby, and then this big booming voice came back from the back of the house. Todd, and he wanted bread with butter on it. And he was shouting and demeaning, and it was quite obvious to me that he was drunk out of his mind. And he was yelling at this kid and stuff. And I didn't think until later, but I thought, that's why he's a bully. That's all he knows at home. He's bullied all the time. The only way for him to feel meaningful is to bully other people. The problem with human nature is, and here's the truth, and this may come as a great disappointment to you. You'll never please people. You never will. Okay? Social cues are valuable. Learning how to interact with other people are good. That's good. You're going to pick up on those things. But here's the thing. When you do the right thing and when you live with purpose, or even if you don't, there's always going to be people who hate you. There will always be people who despise you. In fact, psychologists say that about 15% of people will never mix with you. Whatever your personality trait is, there's going to be certain individuals who you don't mix with. You can love them, you can, all those kind of things, but they will drive you crazy. Do you know that? I remember one person, a speaker I was talking to and whatever, and she said, you know, I try as hard as I can to get along with everybody. And that's scriptural, right? As much as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone, right? But she said, every once in a while there's someone that just doesn't mix. I mean, we try everything, and it's just not somebody who's ever going to be my buddy. She says, so I go home and I go, 15. Must be one of the 15. Now, if you find 85% of the 15, then you have a problem, okay? It's not people, it's you, okay? And I want to tell you, every year when I go on vacation in July, you know, people drive me crazy. I just, and it's great. I go away for a couple of weeks and I come back and everybody has changed. It's really nice. And I just want to tell you guys, I really appreciate when you change when I go on vacation, right? That has nothing to do with you, it's me, right? And so here's the thing. People, you always let them down. But to live for the purposes of God, you have to be willing to make people uncomfortable in a level that may make you stand out. And this is where many people get uncomfortable, because we Canadians, we like to get along. We don't like making waves, do we? We not watch that nonsense that's going on in the United States and we go, oh, it's so good we live here. We're Canadians. We hold our, stuff better. We aren't as opinionated, and we're not as, brash and all those kind of things. And we tend to think of ourselves higher. Here's the problem. Canadians tend to err on the wrong side, to where they actually need to speak up or do something or live for a higher purpose, and they don't do it because they're scared of seeming, outstanding or seeming too uppitish, right? Well, here's the thing. When you live for Christ, there's going to be times you stick out like a sore thumb. When you live with purpose, there's going to be times where you are exceptional. I remember one person, a speaker, Tony Campolo, a number of years said, the reason Mother Teresa was so famous and so special was not what she did. And she used to, take kids from the streets of Calcutta and take people who are dying of AIDS and illness and treat them with dignity and love them and serve them and all those kind of things. Tony Campolo said, it's not what she's doing, it's the fact that she's the only one doing it. And that's often purpose. When you are willing to do something and stand out like a sore thumb for your purpose, the idea of living for Christ or for a higher purpose, something you're called to, you will start to stand out. And for Canadians, this sometimes makes us really uncomfortable, but here's the thing. It's important we do this. Where's going to be the person who takes on the great ills of easy credit in Canada? Millions and millions of people in governments borrow to the point to where they live in bondage. In fact, I'm sure some of you do. Who's going to be the person that's going to talk to the banks and the credit card companies and protest and say, drive the interest rates down, cap off the credit, make it so that people can only borrow what they can manage to pay back? We're so used to easy credit, we think it's the way life's supposed to be. Who's going to be the person that stands up to that injustice? Who's going to be the person who takes on internet pornography? The largest group of people who are slaves to internet pornography are people between the ages of 12 and 17. Who's going to stand up and say, let's get that crap right off the internet? Who's going to do it? Somebody is going to stand out and do it. And they're going to do it against the hail of voices that say, it's free speech, it's liberty, and people make their own choices, and it's not that bad for you and all that. Somebody's going to be a crusader who's going to take on that Goliath and say, let's get that off the internet. Let's save the generation of kids who are growing up seeing more explicit acts than they can ever act on their whole lives. Who's going to do that? You see, Mother Teresa isn't special because of what she did. She's special because she was the only one who did it, right? And so there may be people here, God is calling you to a higher purpose, something to do with that. So what does purpose enable us to do? 3 things. First is this: purpose diminishes distractions. When I know what I'm about, when I know the higher purpose that I'm meant to do, it diminishes distractions. It makes the small stuff the small stuff. Here's the thing. I'm sorry, I'm going to compare this to church because it's context in that. But have you ever heard of church that, they had a major split over the color of the carpet or over, where the organ was and, the thing like that? You ever heard of those kind of conflicts? They happen sometimes in churches. They happen in businesses. 2 guys are incredible business partners and their business is booming and all that. And all of a sudden it splits in half. You ever see those kind of things happen? Well, when you see those kind of things happen, often people get their eyes on distractions. They start to sweat the small stuff to such an extent that the structure or the frame or the purpose is lost in all the noise. And people start getting petty about little things. A lot of marriages come apart, and there'll be this fight over this crazy thing. And people look at them and go, you're ridiculous. You're busting your marriage over that? But it happens a lot of times because the purpose of the marriage is lost. There's a woman a number of years ago who wrote a book on marriage. She was a marriage counselor for years and years and years, and it just wasn't working. And she found what she was doing is taking couples together and helping them solve the things they were fighting about. And they would solve the things they were fighting about, and they were still mad at each other. And she figured this out. She said if you look at a lot of marital discord, it is often over illogical, petty, funny little arguments. She said maybe the arguments aren't what it's about. Maybe there is something deeper happening in those marriages for me to be aware of. And she came up with this really, really kind of cool concept, which may seem obvious, but is actually a brilliant breakthrough in the realm of psychology. She said marriages only work when they're based on love. And love is illogical. You hear me? Love a lot of times is illogical. She said once she focused in on the love thing, because what happens when couples fight, they lose trust, and it builds space, and there's this chasm between them because they don't want to let their guard down around their spouse because they're either going to get picked on or picked at, or they're just angry, or they have something they want to hide and they're too ashamed to own up to it or whatever, and marriages end up in these huge chasms between them where there's no more love because they're fighting about all these little things. She said, what happened if we take couples and we focus on the love thing and allow the couple or help the couple get on the same side so they can address the problems as a team? And all of a sudden, the success rate of the couple she was working with went from 15% to 75% success. Why? Because marriages are based on love. You can focus on all the challenges and the arguments, but the reality is that if you have a purpose, it diminishes distractions. Marriages are not logical, but they're right, and they're based on love. And many marriages, they struggle because they've come to a place where love is secondary, and instead they're focusing on the minors. Didn't know you're getting any marital counseling today, right? Purpose diminishes distractions. Purpose pushes you through pain. The adversity of the challenge that many of us go through, purpose helps us to see our way through it. Because if you have a higher purpose, you're not scared to go through conflict. 2007, I sat down with a friend of mine, Jeff Christofferson. He's a church planter in Oakville, my hometown where I grew up. And Jeff planted churches all across Canada. And he kind of was a coach of mine. And he had just done what we did here at Kawartha. He had planted a number of gatherings. And they were kind of holding it together and are doing all those kind of things. And he said, I'm really struggling. And I was really interested because he was kind of ahead of me in the way of thinking that. And I said, what happened? He said, well, we planted these churches, but now they want to do their own thing, which would be fine if it was lined up with the purposes of reaching people for Christ. The whole reason we planted the church for the first place. But instead, they want to get off on all these kind of little tangents and stuff. And he said, we don't know what to do. I said, well, what are you considering? He said, well, we could take them over, we could fire the guy or, those kind of things. He said, we really don't know what to do. We could plant them out. But he said, it's kind of hard for us because if we plant them out, then we've put all this work into a church that doesn't work anymore. And he said it was a real struggle. And I remember coming back from that in 2009. As you know, here at KCC, we went through a number of changes. The changes really had a lot to do with keeping focus on our purpose. 2 slides down, Jason. This is the purpose of Kawartha Community Church. Kawartha Community Church exists for the purpose of helping spiritually seeking people become fully devoted followers of Christ. Doesn't seem that complicated, does it? But we had reached a time as a church where this was on the chopping block, where people were all together and say, we got this great thing. And there was all kinds of theological rabbit trails and conflict and angst and all those kind of things. And I suddenly woke up one day and I said, you know what? The reason I planted this church isn't what this church is about anymore. Instead, it was about church models, and I was famous all over Canada, and I was sitting in interviews, and I was doing all this kind of stuff, and my name was up in lights, but instead of focusing on what God had called us to do, we had lost it. There's just all kinds of, and it wasn't bad people or bad decisions or anything. It just kind of ended up where a place where KCC had lost its burning passion to reach people for Jesus Christ. And so we went through a lot of changes. And probably those of you who were with us at the time thought they were a little painful, right? Were they a little painful? Yeah. Do you know what? I don't regret it a bit. I don't regret it a bit because we are focused back where we need to be again. And we planted those churches out, and God bless them. You know, they have their purposes and all those kind of things, but we recognized that this, our purpose statement, was more important. Purpose helps you push through pain. You're willing to make unpopular decisions or willing to stand out for the right reasons. Confession. You know, like you've got something in your life and it's holding you down and you've just been in bondage for years about it. And you're like, I'm so sick of this. And you feel guilty. You come to church, you feel guilty. You know, all those kind of things. And often the first step in overcoming that thing is being willing to go to another person, tell your story, and say, I need help. But how few people do that? Why? Because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable telling someone you don't measure up. It's uncomfortable going to someone and saying, I'm addicted to opiates. It's uncomfortable going to someone and saying, you know what, I've been watching these movies and they're really disturbing, but I'm just caught up in them. But at the same time, I can't stop. I want it, but I don't want it. And, you know, all these kind of things. It's uncomfortable to do that. So we suffer in silence for year after year after year. But when we have purpose, it helps us push through pain. Because when you have a higher purpose, you're willing to do what you need to do to fulfill that purpose. And so what you do is you find out, okay, something's hindering the purpose. Okay, we got to slay that dragon. So you go for help, you confess, you do the counseling, you do whatever you need to do to make yourself whole. I will always respect far more people who are willing to say, I am weak, I need help, than people that do a really good job of showing that they have it all together all the time, right? And you do too. The authenticity of saying, I need other people. I can't do it in my own strength. And I need God. This is a powerful trait. So purpose helps you push through pain. And then the third one, purpose empowers you to please God. God is looking for people who are willing to live for a higher purpose. People who are willing to put God first. People who are willing to put God above their own wants and needs. You live with a higher purpose. And when you do so, you live in obedience to God. I remember sometimes people come to me and they'll say, you know, I really love Jesus, but there's this one thing I do. And I know it just doesn't line up for Scripture. You know, or it doesn't line up with the Bible. Or I know God probably doesn't like this part of me. And I always give them the same answer. And I'm not one for trite answers. You know, I have this quote I use from time to time. For every complicated problem, there's one simple, totally wrong answer, right? And that's often the way. A lot of times you're going through this and someone will say, well, just do this. Just say no. You know, it's just like, thanks, genius. That never occurred to me, you know? It's kind of like mom, you know, when you're walking along, you bang into a counter and you bang your head and she goes, careful. Well, thank you. Too bad you couldn't have said that 5 minutes ago, right? Okay, it's that kind of thing. But here is a simple answer, because this helps clarify the purpose of God. And the question is this: that thing you're hanging on to, do you love Jesus enough that if he told you to stop, you would do it? Do you love Jesus enough that if he told you to stop, you would do it? So that's where it all comes down to. You know, I've had people like, you know, they'll go, you know, I do this, or I want to hang on to this, or I want to do this, or, you know, I'm absorbed with this, or whatever. And I'm all in with Jesus except that one thing. You know, I have objections, they'll say. But here's a question to a Christ follower. Because when I gave my life to Jesus, and I chose to serve God, I am acquiescing to his purposes. And so the question I have with every part of my life is, do I love Jesus enough that if he asked me to sacrifice this part, I would do it. I would pay the price to do it. That's quite literally what it means to live with the purpose of God. So here's a couple questions just to walk through in closing, and then we'll take time for some things. Ask the question, what is my main purpose? You ever thought about it? You ever sat down, wrote a purpose statement? You know, Bob lives for the purpose of, and I'm talking about in a spiritual sense, and that's a great thing. Sometimes there's a calling God asks you to do something. For me, it's reaching people for Christ and helping them become Jesus freaks, okay? I happen to think that should be the purpose of every church, but that's specific me. You get me, you get that, okay? And you know, that's my purpose. It really aligns with this church. But here's the question. Some of you, maybe God is calling you to do something totally radical. Go be a doctor in Africa. Or, you know, like Naomi next week, you know, helping poor kids all over the country. What is that purpose? Because here's the thing. There's probably something in your life that you can't stand. Ever confronted with it, it drives you nuts. That's probably has something to do with what you're meant to do in this life. And I'm not talking about like whoever the guy was that found out watermelon seeds offensive. You know, it's just, that's got to stop. So they made seedless watermelons. I mean, who dedicates their life to that, eh? I mean, it's a good Seinfeld joke, but it's true. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things where people are hurt or in bondage or whatever, and you can't stand it. What is your purpose? Do you know? Maybe it's a question. You got to figure it out. What's my main distraction? What's holding me back? Now, unless you're in a little queue, there's always distractions, but a lot of times there's one at the top of the hill for every person. And slaying that dragon probably looks like the toughest thing you'll ever do. But are you willing to live with the purposes of God to such an extent that you're willing to slay that dragon? You're willing to do whatever I need to do to overcome that. What's my main distraction? What's my greatest pain? What am I going to be willing to suffer to go through this? I remember someone when I was in pastoral ministry saying this. You have to be willing in ministry to be unpopular to do the right thing. You have to, because if you're a constant people pleaser, then you will never accomplish anything. You have to be willing to make a stand on things, they said. It's the same of a business owner, it's the same of you, it's the same as a father or mother or friend or whatever. There has to be things about you that are uncompromised. Because if you have no values, or if you believe anything, you'll fall for everything, right? I remember the great, I can't remember the comedians, the Groucho brothers. Remember one of their quotes was, these are my values. If you don't like them, I have others. That's often a lot of people the way they live, right? These are my values. If you don't like them, I got others, you know. Just pull out just as long as you like me, right? You got to be willing to be uncomfortable. So what pain are you willing to suffer to do that? And to choose purpose, I will. Okay, what's your step today? What step do you need to take to fulfill what God is calling you to do? What step do you need to take to put God in your life? What step do you need to take to go, do I love Jesus enough to give him everything? You know? If he asks me to stop this thing I'm in or starts me to start this thing in my life, am I willing to do that? And that's our challenge today. All right, you've put the Q&A one up. Does anybody have a question? You can text it to me, or you can, the number on the board, or you can put your hand up. Jeremy, okay? Yeah.
There's when Dave was speaking about one of his messages based on the series, I think it was for your previous one. Mm-hmm. I was trying to ask about why is it possible that they throw in, like with the story of Moses, for example, when the slaves the water had turned to blood.
Yeah.
They use alligators or lizards, or not just lizards, but alligators,
okay.
And they ate up the Egyptians or something.
Okay.
But in the Bible, it doesn't even say that.
Yeah, it was in the movie.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
is it possible that they just twist it to make it seem like it's just a different scenario?
They're trying to sell tickets. Yeah, it was money. That's what it's about. Yes. Michael. I get two Michaels. This is good. And then someone else. I want to hear from other people. Yes.
I'm going to go back to the first thing you said in the whole service, because I thought of it then and I decided I was going to remember it for now.
Okay.
Too much choice. Great example. Netflix, which a whole bunch of us here have, decided years ago that people weren't watching or enjoying enough movies on their service. So they artificially limited the number of movies you see. A lot of people complain
Yes.
because they think there aren't enough movies to watch on Netflix.
Yes.
But Netflix artificially limited each category to about 60 movies.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
if you have too many choices,
Yep.
you won't watch one.
Yep. And then they can come out and say, next month, we've got these ones added to it. And
Well, it's
these
not
ones
even
coming out.
that.
Yeah.
It's even within the categories that are there.
Yep.
If you search for a movie, you'll find it, but if you go to the category for the movie, it won't be there because they're artificially limiting the list, so you'll just pick a movie and watch it.
That's a genius, eh? Yeah, they recognize that. You're smarter than you look, man. Okay, someone else. Okay, listen, you guys, the Q&A, I don't want to be critical, but you guys have not been great at the Q&A. So I want someone besides Jeremy and Mike to ask a question, and you'll get a chocolate bar for asking a question. Okay, come on. I'm rolling out the chocolate, not you. Do you seriously have another question? No, I didn't think so. Someone else. Oh, Doug. You want coffee, crisper? Well, let's see if it's a good question first.
Is there a difference between a purpose, your purpose, and a calling?
In the way I'm dealing with it today, I would say they're aligned. I would say they're aligned. Because what could be a higher purpose than something God has called you to? Right? You know? Like companies have purposes, you know, like to sell widgets or to do that. But companies found long ago that those kind of purposes aren't really great. And so what they've done is they've applied them, they've actually enhanced them. Okay, so all of a sudden, Walt Disney, the company, their purpose is to make people happy. And you think, well, that's really hard to tell or whatever, but it actually works because people go, are people happy? Are what we're doing making people happy? If it's not. I remember we had a crisis here at the college. In 1995, 20% of our budget got cut. So the college, we had to sit down, reassess our programs, all those kind of things. Anyways, the main group came back with this statement. And the statement was this: Sir Sanford Fleming College exists for the purpose of helping students. Well, you would not believe the uproar that went over that. We had people going, but I don't like students. The students aren't nice to me. Students smell funny. Students are immature. Students are this. I'm thinking, what the heck are you working at a college for if you hate students, right? But that was a reassessment, and all of a sudden as a college we started going, okay, how can we help students? And some people were really uncomfortable with that, which was really funny actually at the time. So that's a good question. You want Kit Kat or coffee, Chris, man? You want the Kit Kat? Can you catch? See if your baseball skills are still there? If not, I'll just hit Dave in the head. See, I made it towards Daniel because I know he could catch it. Okay, someone else, question. Oh, Zach up here. Yeah. It's a slave to his stomach. All right, Zach. What do you got for me, buddy?
What is peer pressure?
What is peer pressure? I like that. That's a good question. What do you want, coffee, Chris, or Kit Kat? Kit Kat. Okay, the answer to your question is I have no idea. No, just kidding. Peer pressure is the pressure exerted, like let's say, how old are you, Zach?
11.
You're 11. You're getting up there, pal. A bunch of other 11-year-olds in your class, okay? Let's say a whole bunch of them want to play a game that's rated 18A or M for mature, okay? And they're all doing that. But you know that that's wrong. But here's the thing. You want to fit in. So all of a sudden, the question is, am I going to do what's right or listen to mom and dad? Or am I going to go along with these guys, even though it makes me uncomfortable because I want them to accept me. I want them to think I'm cool. I want them to think I'm awesome, okay? That's peer pressure. Peer pressure is when people try to change your behavior so that you fit in, okay? Sometimes peer pressure is good. If you get a whole bunch of people and they're doing something good. Maybe they're helping someone else or, they're doing a good thing. Something that aligns with kind of something you think God would like and your parents would approve of. That's good peer pressure. Bad peer pressure is when you get an opportunity to do something wrong and you kind of feel pressure to do it because you want to fit in with that group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good question. Thanks. Anybody else got a question? Isn't it crazy? The 11-year-old came up with the best question of the day. Okay, Eric, you got to one-up this one, man. It's going to be tough. All I got is coffee, Chris. Sorry.
How many chocolate bars do you have?
Pardon me?
How many chocolate bars do you have?
I got 2.
That was my question, though.
Yeah, because you wouldn't got a chocolate bar for that. All right, shoot.
Is it possible to have more than one purpose, or is that just an internal conflict that you need to make some decisions?
Yes. It's possible to have, although it's rare, okay? Can I give you an example? My purpose is helping spiritually seeking people become fully devoted followers of Christ. I'm basically trying to make you guys all into Jesus freaks, okay? But here's the thing. I grew up without a dad. And so when I'm in a situation where I encounter young boys who have no father figure, it drives me nuts, okay? Not in an annoyed sense, but in a, it hurts when I'm around people like that, okay? Now I can view that as a purpose, and in many times I've found I'm a spiritual father to many people. And that's something I'm real passionate about and I really love and things. And it actually aligns with my purpose because a lot of the people I'm influencing to become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ are young people. I don't know why. I'm always spending my time around college, university age people. But here's the thing with that is that's something I can't stand because I grew up in that setting and I know how painful it was growing up without a dad. Okay? And so that's something that, very much is something. It may be something different with you. Maybe you had a mother who was addicted to counseling or addicted to gambling or something, addicted to counseling. You know what? Don't laugh. There's people like that. Here, he's a chocolate bar. Man, that's a great question. That's good. One more. I got one more to go. I know we're running late. We're never going to beat the Baptists to Swiss Chalet, but... oh, yeah. Trish, you got one?
I don't want to talk about it. You can give it somewhere else.
Okay.
Seeing how you've been following up with your previous talks about self-gratification and delaying
Yeah.
with the chocolate bars. No.
What?
Actually, I just see how this all ties in together now.
Yeah.
Because the purpose is in delaying the self-gratification. So there's two ways of
Yes.
looking at today. Some people don't know what their purpose is.
Yes.
And I'm wondering about the calling thing because
Yes.
they need to, I guess we all need to pray to get
Yeah.
that calling, to find
Yeah.
out what it is.
Yeah.
Or they know what their purpose is or what they want to do and can't get to it
Yeah.
because of the day-to-day self-gratification,
The distractions, yeah.
the distractions.
Yeah.
So what I have learned from being here is that I have to look past those the day-to-day
Yeah.
pleasures.
Yeah.
And at this time of year with all the beauty and I would say sensual pleasures,
Yes.
going
Yeah.
out and
Yeah.
gardening, and
Yeah.
you can always put that ultimate purpose for later. Procrastination.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what that I have to work on after
Yeah.
talking to you, and it's motivated me, and I really appreciate this service.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Trish. Takes
Pass.
one to know one. I'm a man of many passions myself, including chocolate. But no, that was great. Yes, Gracie. You can't have the rest of my chocolate bar.
Do you have suggestions about how you overcome your desire to procrastinate for the purpose that you are here for?
Well, there's always a couple of options. First one is to give into it. And that's actually not a bad choice sometimes, okay?
There
No.
it is in your hand, right?
I have this saying, okay? We retire to inspire. There actually is an aspect of faith, and this is a big aspect of it, called Sabbath. That there should be times during our week where we breathe in and we let go, okay? It's actually one of the 10 Commandments. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, okay? And so that's an aspect of my life that I recognize that rest isn't an end in itself, it's for a purpose. I breathe in, I get caught up with my faith, as far as allowing God to influence me and listen to his voice and do that. I give myself permission to do that. And as I get older, I find I need that Sabbath. It's more meaningful to me than when I was 29 and never stopped, okay? That when I take that time, I retire to inspire so that when I go back to work, I go with gusto and purpose and love and all that. So that's one aspect to it, okay? So stopping isn't always a bad thing. In fact, it's commanded that there is times we should stop. Second thing is I conduct my life around the purposes, okay? So for me, it's helping spiritually seeking people become fully devoted followers of Christ. I actually relate to people who don't go to church better than people a lot of times who've gone to church for 40 years. And the reason is I spend a lot of time around people who are either new to faith or are trying it out or have that very refreshed new approach to faith. And that invigorates me and inspires me. So at any given time at KCC, we'll have, everybody here. There's probably about 30, 40 other people I have relationships with outside the church who I'm probably the only person they know who's a Christian. And so I spend my time influencing them, not because I'm out to get them like headhunter or whatever, but because I learn from them, and I believe they benefit from me because they learn faith and learn about God and stuff. So I live with that higher purpose. So I place myself in situations to where I'm interacting with people that don't know Christ. And I actively pursue those things. As a minister, there are always lots of great church functions going on in town. There's always hundreds of them. I could go out every night a week, do a church function somewhere, right? And a lot of us could. But I choose instead to limit the church functions, still keep my faith invigorated, still spend time around other believers and all that, but I also look for opportunities. I build purposely into my life opportunities to do that. So I live for that higher purpose. And then the third thing is I recognize distractions, that if I'm getting too worked up about distractions, about small stuff, my heart's in the wrong place. So if if I'm constantly obsessed with little naggy things, you know how you drive and other people are driving crazy and you get all worked up and hot and bothered and all that kind of stuff. I find those kind of things. If I'm starting to get angry, if I'm starting to resent people more than love them, if I'm starting to become just wanting to be by myself all the time, something wrong with my heart. Okay? I may need a rest, but I might also need to adjust my heart. And so I recognize the distractions, the little stuff. If I'm getting too caught up in the little stuff. If I'm worrying a lot, I guess that's the word you're looking for, worrying. I spend a lot of time worrying. You never worry though, do you, Grace? Never once. Yeah, okay. All right, we've kept you really long, but we're going to pass the baskets around. There's outies and then innies. The outies are the ones you take stuff out of. The innies are the ones you put stuff in. If you're visiting with us today, we want our service to be a blessing to you. Please don't feel obligated to give anything, because if I invited you over to supper and I fed you this wonderful meal and you left a $20 bill under the plate, I'd be offended. Okay? So we want this to be a blessing. If you choose to join us and KCC becomes your church home, by all means support it. But one thing you can do is there's a little green card in there, is want to leave a message. If you have something you want us to pray about, or if you want to be on our email list, we have emails that go out every week, and sometimes emails you get are good. They're the ones Selena does. Sometimes they're bad, the ones with the typos. Those are the ones I send out, okay? But you do keep informed and up to date all the kind of things that are going on at KCC, the topics and all that. And so that's a great opportunity to do that. Whatever you take out of the one basket, the pens, the forms, all those kind of stuff, you just let them pass by, and then the innies come around. The innies are the ones you put stuff in, and they'll follow around. While we're doing that, I got some quotes coming up, and then John's going to come up and lead a song or two. Okay? Thank you.
All right, why don't you stand and let's take some time to worship.
Christ is my reward and all of my devotion. Now there's nothing in this world could ever satisfy. And through every trial, my soul will sing, no turning back. I've been set free. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. And everything I need is in you. And everything I need. Christ, my all in all. Joy in my salvation, and this hope will never fail. Heaven is our home. Through every storm, my soul will sing. Jesus is here. To God be the glory. Is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. And everything I need is in you. And everything I need. And I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. Decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. Turning back. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. And everything I need is in you. And everything I have decided. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back, no turning back, no turning back, no turning back. Turning back. You are my supply, my breath of life. Still more awesome, I know. You are my reward. Worth living for. Still more awesome than I know. And all of you is more than enough for all of me. For every thirst and every need, you satisfy me with your love. And all I have in you is more than enough. all of you is more than enough for all of me, for every thirst and every need. You satisfy me with your love, and all I have of you, more than all I want, more than all I want, more than all I need. You are more than enough for me, more than all I know, more than all I can see. You are more than enough, more than all I want, more than all I need. You are more than enough for me, more than all I know, more than all I can see. You are more than enough, and all of you is more than enough for all of me, for every thirst and every need. You satisfy me with your love, and all I have in you, and all I have in you is more than enough.
Doesn't count if you got your own name in. John Potter. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel here, but yes. Just kidding. Next week, Naomi Streimer. Encourage you to be here. Bring a friend. It's going to be awesome. And with that in mind, thank you for your patience today. The message will be up on YouTube either this afternoon or Tuesday morning. And so if you feel like punishing yourself by watching it 4 more times, it'll be up there for you to watch again. God bless you. Remember His purposes, what He has called you to do. Fidelity to a higher purpose is really absolutely essential for life. And so be willing to be unpopular. Be willing to push through the pain. Be willing to diminish the distractions and commit yourself to the purposes of God. Do I love Jesus enough to give Him everything? And with that in mind, God bless you as you go. We'll see you next week. Thanks.